All right, we are live.
Hey, everybody.
Here for session 5 of our Ketogenic, our Keto Study Club. So I will cue the intro, and then we'll get going. All right.
Yeah, I know it always pumps me up.
I love it.
getting ready to do some more studying. So you guys doing okay today?
Yeah. I'm doing great. Had to go to a meeting. I normally work from home, and so had to, not in downtown Nashville, thank goodness, but there was still enough traffic. But it was good to see my coworkers face to face, and it was more of a bonding kind of thing, team building thing. So it wasn't anything serious. So it was really nice.
Nice. Good. How about you, Kim?
Well, I've just been hanging out. This is my second day of 14 off in a row. My second staycation of the summer.
Nice.
Yeah, and I just got a new refrigerator and a new deep freeze. So I'm excited about that. Cool. I can fit lots of meat in that bad boy.
Awesome. Right. Good. So are you going to buy like a beef from a local rancher, or what's the plan?
I mean, I don't have that plan yet, but I have yet to find a local rancher and then have that amount of money to spend on meat all at once.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe someday, but right now we're doing just Walmart and it's working just fine. So Walmart and Kroger and Sam's Club.
Yeah.
Where I get my meat. So
good deal. Good deal. Well, I'm ready to jump in if you guys are.
Let's do it.
All right. So I guess I had you guys start last time, so I'll start this time. And okay, so we left off. So we're still in chapter 1. For those who are joining us for the first time, this is the book we're going through. And this is different than a book review of our book club. This is a study group. So we actually don't read ahead of time. We read together, we discuss together, and we
learn together.
Exactly. So this is a very different format than a regular book club. It's something that, I don't know. Do you guys see that? Anyone else doing this on YouTube?
I haven't seen it.
And we're
glasses, so
we're the weirdos. So
you go ahead, okay?
No, we're innovative. That's
innovative. There you go. That's the good one. Okay, so if you like being read to instead of actually reading, this might be a good thing for you. All right, so I'm going to start. We left off at section 1.1.3, and the section title is called The Pitfalls of Modern Industrial Food Preparation. Okay, so the modern health crisis is caused by the ultra-processed industrial diet and dietary changes following the introduction of mass food manufacturing. The modern ultra-processed industrial diet that is now consumed by most populations around the world deviates profoundly from the diet of traditional agricultural societies that was common less than 100 years ago. Traditional food preparation methods are not used in modern industrial food preparation. The change in the primary food sources eaten by humans may form only a part of the difference between what we eat and what our ancestors ate. As we have described, traditional food preparation techniques such as fermentation, soaking, sprouting, and nixtamalization. I hope
that sounds good.
I have never heard that word before.
I have had to say that word on here before in this book.
Okay.
And I didn't know what it was.
I don't know what that is. Okay. So maybe if they don't explain it, we may have to look it up.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
Okay. So we're practiced in pre-industrial and even early industrial societies to remove plant toxins and increase the absorption of energy, vitamins, and minerals from grains, vegetables, and milk, respectively. But these methods are no longer commonly followed. Ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, now dominate the global food system, providing up to 58% of the energy consumption and 90% of calories from added sugars in the U.S. diet. UPFs include breakfast cereals, savory snacks, reconstituted meat products, frankfurters, prepackaged frozen dishes, soft and or sweetened drinks, distilled alcoholic beverages, and supplements. Most of the methods used to mass produce these industrial foods do not fully utilize the anti-nutrient removal methods developed by traditional societies. Thus, the nutritional value of these industrially produced foods is further compromised.
Okay, one second. Proud to be Weird says that that's how you process corn. That what nixtamalization is how you process corn. That they must do that before making tortillas and other corn products in order for it to be digestible.
So glad you're here.
I know.
We get so many great answers.
Yeah.
You're going to have to tell us what your actual name is.
I mean, we're all proud to be weird.
We're all proud to be weird. Yeah, that's right. That's all of us.
Yeah, we definitely identify with your username.
Oh, we totally identify with your username. Absolutely. Yeah, let us know who you are and where you're from. That would be awesome, because we really appreciate you being here. And thank you for that. Awesome.
Cynthia.
Cynthia. Awesome. Okay.
Right.
I'm going to write that down because my brain forgets names. Awesome. Okay, good deal.
All right.
Okay, so observational studies confirm the association between the consumption of ultra-processed foods and a range of non-communicable diseases, including type 2 diabetes, all-cause and cardiovascular mortality, and obesity, including visceral obesity. UPFs also impair skeletal maturation in rats, a finding McCarrison would have predicted. As yet, no randomized controlled trials have been concluded to test these relationships. Oh, French Canadian, Quebec. I love it. My husband's Canadian. Awesome. And Sandra, I'm proud to be weird too. Awesome. I love it. That's such a great name.
We can just be the Weird People Society.
That's right. That's right. My husband he's from British Columbia. So, but he's now.
My dad's Canadian.
Your dad's Canadian?
Yeah, Quebec.
From Quebec?
Yep.
Oh, nice. Yeah, one of my coworkers when I was working was from Quebec, and she ended up moving back there to take care of her mom. So, but yeah, wonderful. Glad to have you here, Cynthia. That's awesome. Okay, so that's a little introductory paragraph to this section. Okay,
I can go next.
Pretty self-explanatory. All right, you going to take the next one?
Sure. 1.1.3.1, the prescription of polyunsaturated fatty acids in seed oils to replace saturated fats. Most explanations of why the current dietary guidelines have failed to prevent obesity and related chronic diseases typically ignore the obvious evolutionary mismatch between this novel diet and the natural species-specific diet on which humans evolved. A good example is the recommendation to limit the consumption of saturated fat. But animal fat, the primary source of saturated fats in the diet, has been an essential component of humans' natural diet for millions of years and has always been cherished by traditional societies.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I liked that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I like it too. And that falls in. I think I've mentioned that old book that I've got. I found it at the Goodwill for like $1. It's called The Body, that came out in like 1968. And it goes into the whole debate about this. So the science was not decided. I mean, they were really arguing this point and warning that it would have disastrous consequences to do that. So I just found that really interesting that going back that far that,
yeah.
so people would say, oh, the science is decided. Well, it wasn't.
No. And
No.
from the big fat surprise that we read, we know how much debate there was, and then suppression.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and who was the one? It was like there was one or two that were like, hey guys, this is probably not the greatest idea. We don't really know this for sure. And they just got shut
They
down.
got just shut down, bullied like crazy.
No funding, anything. I mean, they were just basically excommunicated, blackballed.
Yeah, absolutely. So the science is definitely not settled.
Yeah, and it wasn't then, and it isn't now.
It still isn't. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's more settled, but I think that we need to the science on this side needs to get out more.
I agree. And like Nina Teicholz talked about, even with the dietary guidelines, studies, it was like they were saying that there weren't any studies that they could refer to about the saturated fat when they were out there. The studies were there, but it was like they were just like, no, they're not.
That's right.
I don't
blinders. Got blinders on.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry for the interruption.
No, but I mean, this is good discussion, because this very, of course, I mean, this is a lot has gone into the making of this book, but it's just neat when you can tie it back into something you've read before or heard before.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Although some studies using surrogate markers have concluded that the replacement of saturated fats with seed oils should improve future health. And I bet you we know what those markers are, don't we?
LDL cholesterol.
You got that right. Ding, ding, ding. Controlled long-term clinical trials measuring hard clinical endpoints have failed to not only support this conclusion, but also, in fact, have identified seed oils as the probable cause of increased risk of mortality. Industrially produced seed oils were first offered less than a century ago, much later than even grains and sugar. Thus, the recovered Minnesota coronary experiment, and this is one that we had read about before too, the one that had been suppressed.
Yeah.
Found, one of them found that persons randomized to the intervention diet, which replaced saturated fat with polyunsaturated fatty acids or PUFAs, linoleic acid, were at a 22% higher risk of death for each 0.78 millimoles per liter or 30 milligrams per deciliter reduction in blood cholesterol concentrations. This adverse effect was especially apparent in those over 65. Think about that. The recovered Sydney, here's another one. The recovered Sydney Diet Heart study also found that the replacement of dietary saturated fat with, why do I stumble on this word, linoleic acid, was associated with increased all-cause mortality and with increased death from both cardiovascular disease and coronary heart disease. Another recently published study found that those with the highest intakes of hydrogenated seed oils had a 68% increased risk for myocardial infarction. No other dietary fat source was associated with increased mortality from ischemic heart disease, cardiovascular disease, stroke, or all causes.
Wow.
Anybody have anything to say about that? I mean, that's
well, it's just crazy that those studies were suppressed. Because those are not insignificant findings.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
I remember, it's funny, I remember being in like high school and seeing the word hydrogenated in some ingredient list and just wondering what that was and wondering why it was in there. I was like 17 and I was just like, how you do sometimes you just look at the back of a label just for the heck of it, you're bored or just you're eating and you're bored and you turn and you're like, what is that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think we were, I grew up thinking of industrialization and the modern techniques and processes as a good thing.
Yeah.
And that it's an advanced society that we live in because we have these processes and manufacturing and all the whole industrial age, and never really was anything brought to my attention that if you're forcing something that's not natural, that it doesn't do in nature, that's not good for your body.
Yeah.
And the whole hydrogenation thing is basically that's what they're doing, right? They're
Yep.
forcing it not to separate. They're forcing it to stay in a mixture that they don't naturally want to stay together, right? They naturally repel each other. And so it's kind of contrary to, I mean, and I grew up with very patriotic parents too. So it's not, I mean, I realize that you're not in the US, this may apply to your country, but in my country, my parents were very patriotic. So to criticize anything that the US was doing was not cool. My dad was a World War II vet. And so the fact that we in this country could be creating products that are unhealthy for the population wasn't even questioned in my home at all.
Yeah. And it was just basically like what we were told. And my parents always kind of had a healthy suspicion of things. Like my mother, which there again, I've talked about before, like how I can't imagine how she ended up taking all that diabetes medication, because when I was like on into my teens, she and my aunt would go to the health food store. They would look for natural remedies. They read these books and just, like, for example, I remember my dad had this book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which if you read that book, there are many things in it that are coming true today, many.
Oh, yeah.
And so they always had a healthy, they loved the country, that, had the work ethic, work hard, all that kind of thing. But at the same time, there was this suspicion of government, kind of there too. Yeah, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
But my dad served during Vietnam. He was not sent there, but he was a medic. And so he treated people when they came home. And so
I think there may have been a big difference too between Vietnam veterans and World War II veterans, because World War II veterans came home to being heroes. And so they had all this support from the government, the population, whereas Vietnam War veterans did not. And so I'm wondering if that kind of inbred more of a skepticism, and, because that was, I mean, we know what happened to the Vietnam War veterans. It was terrible. And
it really was.
Still, they're not being cared for. So Sandra says, I remember learning all this back in the 1980s, hence why in New Zealand and Austria, biodynamic farming became so popular again. The universities in New Zealand doing lifetime studies on people exposed to DDT, etc. Interesting. Yeah, I had my head in the sand, honestly.
Yeah. All right.
When margarine was supposed to have, oh, she said, sorry.
Oh,
sorry, didn't finish my thoughts there. Let's see. My mom always said, I'm never going to bring margarine to my house. Thank God. Yeah, you're lucky. That's all I had growing up.
Yeah, same.
Well, we did too, but I think there was a different reason for it. We just didn't have much money, and margarine was not as expensive as butter. And so that was just one reason why we had that.
Oh, same here. I mean, same here. My dad, after he retired from the military, he worked as a salesman at a department store, and my mom stayed home. And they put all their extra money to put me in private school. And so we had, everything we got was cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah. But again, I don't think that my mom would have done that if she had known that it was unhealthy.
Right.
I mean, she cared about our health and thought that she was feeding us healthy.
Yeah. Same with my mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Kim?
Well, I don't have anything to say relating to that. I'm just wanting to circle back to when you were talking about linoleic acid, and then also last time we were talking about this, and I think we all got a little bit confused. I don't know, maybe it was just me, but I just wanted to clarify for everybody what they actually are. So linoleic acid and alpha linolenic acid are both essential fatty acids that humans can't synthesize, and they're both polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, as you were talking about, or as you were reading, Carrie. Linoleic acid is actually omega-6. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Alpha linolenic acid, ALA, is actually omega-3. So yeah, I just want to clarify that, because sometimes I'll watch back and I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. And then I was Googling, and I don't know why I get confused words, too much.
No, I do too. I have to stop and think about what I just read, even with with the other books that we've been doing in the book club, go back and just reread that and be like, okay, what is that really saying?
Yeah.
And they have so many different, there's so many different words for the same thing,
Yep.
Yeah, and it's good that you clarified that, because we talked about the ratio between omega-3s and omega-6s being, how it's changed over time, and that's been very unhealthy.
And they're both PUFAs.
They're both
polyunsaturated fatty acids, and they're both found in plants such as flax seeds, canola oil, soybeans, and walnuts. And then also they are found in, omega-3 is found in fish. And let's see here. I think omega-6 is found. Anyway, I won't go that deep into it. I think I was digging a hole there for a minute, but
no, that's good. So Sandra says, remember the two fat ladies TV chefs? I don't remember them. Do you guys remember them? The larger one always talked about how evil margarine was because her father ran a factory making this. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So I guess if you run a factory and you see how it's made, you'd see it's not natural.
Oh, yeah. So Cynthia said ALA is the vegan omega-3. DHA and EPA are omega-3 from fish.
Oh, okay.
And so there's even more names for the same thing.
and isn't the ALA the vegan version? And Cynthia, maybe you can clarify this. And if you guys remember, the one that is, it still needs to convert over.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was some of us I thought my doctor had given me that, because the abbreviation for the other medication she gave me, which I can't remember the name off the top of my head, it was ALA, and I was like, this woman has given me fake omega-3.
Fake omega-3s, that's right.
I was so mad.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, all right.
So my turn.
Well, let's see. I'm on the word reviewing. I can finish this part, and you can start in the next section.
Yeah.
Okay. Reviewing the additional evidence provided by the two recovered studies, Ramsden et al., page 13 in reference 127, emphasized that increasing dietary linoleic acid has been shown to increase oxidized linoleic acid derivatives on a dose-dependent manner in many tissues. These oxidized derivatives, along with other non-cholesterol lipid mediators, have been implicated in the pathogenesis of many diseases, including coronary heart disease, chronic pain, and steatohepatitis.
That's fatty liver.
Fatty liver.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. In fact, the explosive growth in the consumption of industrially produced polyunsaturated fats from seed oils, mainly soy oil containing a high level of linoleic acid, is another obvious dietary candidate for the increasing ill health of modern humans. The relative chemical instability of seed oils and their tendency to oxidize in the body and turn into potentially deleterious compound 4-hydroxynonenal.
Big word.
Yeah. Emphasizes their potential role in the promotion of insulin resistance, obesity, cardiovascular and autoimmune diseases, cancer, and diabetes. More long-term clinical studies are needed to establish any role of seed oils in the growth of all of these now common diseases. In reviewing all the current evidence, Lawrence concludes that PUFAs are unstable to chemical oxidation and their oxidation products are harmful in a variety of ways. PUFAs also form powerful signaling agents that can initiate inflammation, which can have dire health consequences. If saturated fats are replaced by carbohydrates in the diet, there would be no significant improvement in serum cholesterol, and it can result in a more atherogenic lipoprotein profile. When looking at much of the data in the context of known biochemical and physiological mechanisms, it appears that saturated fats are less harmful than the common alternatives.
Yeah.
And I believe that.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, I really had no clue just how important it was to avoid seed oils until, I mean, even like I've heard Dr. Berry talk about it over and over and over, but it just really never has sunk in until recently. Probably within the last 6 months, I've been listening to a lot of different, YouTube videos and stuff where they'll have people who have really researched this stuff come on, and it's crazy, like the effects that it can have on our health. I sent you all the one video. I can't remember which one it was now, but basically she had a lot of different graphs on there that show, I mean, you can just tell it goes right with the obesity rate, even more so than sugar. And I'm talking about since like the 1800s.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I watched that. So Cynthia
There
said
is a strong correlation there. Whereas when you look at the fats, the fats and the meat, that consumption was going down at the same time all of that other was going up. So, you can have a correlation and then form a hypothesis. But likewise, if there's no correlation, there's just not a valid hypothesis.
Exactly.
Well, and one of the things with these clinical trials is they talk about ethics when doing clinical trials. So if they've already decided that saturated fats are going to kill you, then they could ethically argue that they can't do an experiment where they have one group just doing saturated fats and another group doing the polyunsaturated fats.
That's it right there.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
you guys need to go watch that.
Yeah, that was a good interview. Yeah.
It is Chris Kenobi with Dr. Berry. It's amazing.
That was a very interesting one. Yeah. But, so are they going to do a study that if they believe that the saturated fats are going to kill you, are they going to subject a group to eating only saturated fats and really compare? They're not going to, right? They're going to pull out their ethics card and say, well, typically we can't do that.
They could recruit people who already willingly eat that. And then there would be no ethical issue because nobody's forcing them into doing that.
But still, it goes along with any dietary study ever in the history of dietary studies. You just can't monitor and trust that people are doing what they say they're doing.
Too many because variables.
I mean, it's just human nature. People want to like do good for your study and do what they're supposed to be doing. But then, oh wait, I ate that, and they may or may not report it. It's just too much.
Yeah.
Well, it was kind of like me being tempted for that real age thing, tempted to fudge it. I was tempted to because, and part of the reason was just because I didn't want, of course, I would have just hung up and quit the program and been done with it if there's any argument. But at the same time, it did occur to me because it's like, they're not going to like this and it doesn't go with the narrative. And so I see how that can happen in a study.
But, this is why, like, this whole like what you're talking about right now is the reason why I refuse to go to my doctor and say, oh, I'm on the Mediterranean diet. There's several doctors in this space, in the ketogenic space, who will tell you, oh, just tell your doctor you're eating a Mediterranean diet. Oh, no, absolutely not. I want carnivore to get the credit for every bit of my health improvement.
That's right.
No, I am absolutely not doing that. Also, I just don't care what they think.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. They need to be educated.
Yeah.
So regarding the ALA, Cynthia said it's not efficient at all, which I remember reading that in our previous book. About 5% gets converted to the good stuff. Yeah, that's like hardly anything, right?
Yeah.
So you want to get the actual source of the EPA DHA from the natural source, not in the form of a vegetable plant-based. Yeah. Okay. All right, Kim, the next two sections are small. You want to read both of
Okay,
those?
sure. And Cynthia said she's got to go. So we'll see you, Cynthia.
Yep.
See ya, Cynthia. Glad to see ya.
Yep. Glad you came in.
Okay, the increased consumption of grains. The second largest dietary change since 1970 has been the increased consumption of grains. Two features of modern bread production stand out. A significant recent genetic change in grain species combined with a dramatic shift in processing techniques due to the industrialization of bread production. The original wheat genus, einkorn, differs significantly from modern wheat, T. astivium, in the number of harmful chemical constituents it contains, something that the germination and fermentation methods used by the historic agriculturalists would have either reduced or removed. Although germination is still used in the preparation of modern mass-produced bread, fermentation time has been reduced from the ideal of 6 to 12 hours to less than 1 hour. Yeah, that is drastic. Additionally, industrial ground flour is devoid of those enzymes that are usually active in anti-nutrient removal. The result is that the prevalence of various wheat-associated harmful conditions continues to increase, and perhaps as a consequence, the consumption of gluten-free food has become increasingly popular.
Yeah, I watched before I was carnivore. I used to watch this YouTube channel of this woman who lived on a ranch, and she had like 8 kids, and she made everything, herself. And her big thing was sourdough bread, but she used the einkorn flour for everything.
Yeah.
And said that made such a huge difference. That the regular flours just kind of cause bloating and, gut issues.
Yeah.
So you can still get that kind of flour. Not that I'm eating any flour, but.
Okay. 1.1.3.3, the increased consumption of sugar and high fructose corn syrup. Sugar is the third food that is unnatural and whose consumption has increased since 1970. Global sugar consumption increased by 30% between 1970 and 2017. There is now a general consensus that Cleve, Campbell, and Yudkin were correct, and that a high consumption of sugar produces many harmful effects. This increased consumption has been associated with a partial replacement of cane sugar in some countries with high fructose corn syrup that contains 55% fructose compared to 50% fructose in sugar. Excessive consumption of fructose as opposed to glucose can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, inflammation and oxidative stress, overweight, and other pathological conditions. The addictive nature of the modern highly processed industrial diet. Increasing attention is now being placed on the addictive nature of modern ultra-processed foods and their contribution to overeating and the development of obesity, perhaps also related to a lower protein content. And I agree that I think that lower protein, plays a huge role there. And, when you're shoving your face hole, as Dr. Berry says, of just every kind of non-food on the grocery store shelves, you don't have room for the filling, very satiating fatty meats.
Yeah. I did not realize that high fructose corn syrup only had 5% more fructose than regular sugar.
I didn't either.
Somehow I didn't know that either.
Yeah. I mean, because it's called high fructose corn syrup, I honestly expected it to be a lot more than regular sugar.
Yeah, like 90% or something.
Yeah. Like that's actually kind of low. I mean, they brought it up as that it has more, but to me, that's like hardly anything.
So it just reinforces that sugar is sugar is sugar,
Yeah.
honey, sugar, glucose, fructose, high fructose. It's all sugar. It's all the same result in your
But I
body.
also know too, the steps to process to get high fructose corn syrup is insane. I mean, I realize that getting table sugar, there's a lot of processes and bleaching and stuff, but getting high fructose corn syrup, I think has a lot more and a lot of more chemicals. So I wonder if it's that processing that makes it even more unhealthy, like proportionally more unhealthy than regular table sugar. But it's still, it's still
Why,
bad. Okay.
why was it? I'm trying to recall, and I feel like I should know this. Why was it that they made high fructose corn syrup to begin with?
Well, I know that there were subsidies, there are agricultural subsidies for corn. And I don't remember. Years ago, I watched the documentary King Corn, and I think that addressed that. And I don't remember specifically like which came first, the chicken or the egg.
And so then I think as a result that because it's subsidized, it's a cheaper ingredient. And so they use that rather than just regular sugar.
Oh yeah, the subsidies make all the difference. I remember they interviewed the farmers, and the farmers said that they literally would be losing money growing corn if it wasn't for the government subsidies. They would.
Okay, I found a little something here. It says high fructose corn syrup was invented in 1957 by Earl Cooey and Richard Marshall as a cheaper alternative to sugar from sugar beets or sugar cane. It became popular in the 1970s due to a combination of factors, including cost. It was cheaper than imported sugar due to government subsidies that encouraged corn production and kept corn prices low. Stability, it's more stable than other sweeteners, especially in acidic drinks like sodas. Ease of use, it's a liquid that's easier to transport, handle, and mix than granulated sugar. And sweetness, it's just as sweet as sucrose or table sugar. So,
I had such a horrible sugar addiction. What I used to do, which is terrible, it wasn't every day, but it was enough. If there wasn't anything sweet in the house for me to munch on, I would grab a little bowl and I'd put a bunch of peanut butter on it. And then I would pour Caro syrup all over it.
Oh my goodness.
I know how sweet that stuff is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar though. Me and my babysitter, who was 6 years older than me, so we were not the same level, but like we were buddies more than anything. We would get peanut butter and spread it on 2 slices of bread and then sprinkle sugar on the peanut butter and make the sandwich.
Oh, wow. As if there wasn't already enough sugar in the peanut butter, probably, because it was probably like Jiffy or.
And you got that little gritty texture. It was, those were the days when we had no knowledge of what we were doing.
We wonder why we got unhealthy, right?
Yeah, really. Right. And then if mom were to buy the cereal that didn't have the sugar on it, I would put so much sugar in it that it would be way more sugar than what the sugared cereal would come with. Because I wanted to scrape the bottom and get a little crunchy with each bite.
Because my mother would not buy what she called kid cereals or sugary cereals. So she would buy stuff like cornflakes. And so she was trying to be healthy. She knew sugar was bad. I guess she just didn't, take it one step further with the grains in the cereal itself. But
yeah.
And
we had no idea that healthy whole grains were not healthy. What?
And I did like you. I would pour that sugar on there. And if she caught me, she'd get mad, because the whole point was you weren't supposed to eat all that sugar. But I'd put a bunch of sugar, and then like you, I would dig in with the spoon, like right to the bottom, and you get that mixture of the milk and the sugar.
Oh, God. I'm sure we're really triggering somebody right now.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was terrible. So Sandra says they would mill their own flour. Yeah, so people used to mill their own flour. Before I went carnivore, I was actually trying to get healthy as best as I could and without the right knowledge. And I bought wheat berries and, from a farmer. And and I was grinding it into flour and I was baking my own bread. And even though, yes, that was a lot of carbs and it was a lot of natural grain-based sugar, I did notice the way it made my gut feel was better when I did it that
Oh,
way.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was still really bloated, but it was better. It was not great. I mean, obviously, when I cut it out completely, things were so much better. I mean, I was doing that, but I still had, I was still, over 300, almost 350 pounds. And I was still like my rosacea, all my symptoms were horrible, but my gut was a little better. So, all righty. So, all right, I'll read the summary. All right, so section 1.1.4 is a summary. So the first section of this chapter shows how humans and their ancestors have maintained their health and thrived on a wide range of different diets. During the 2.5 million years of our evolution, humans consumed an animal-based, fat-rich diet in which their physiology and metabolism became very well adapted. With the establishment of agriculture about 10,000 years ago, more plant-sourced foods entered the human diet. After a bumpy start and with time, humans developed food systems that allowed them to stay almost as healthy on an agricultural diet as they had been for more than 2 million years on the natural species-specific diet. But the modern industrial diet that has become ever more prevalent since World War II has been associated with a progressive impairment in human health across the globe. The cause appears to be that more than 50% of the calories consumed in the modern industrial American diet come in the form of seed oils, grains, and sugar, often in a diet comprising ultra-processed foods. While grains approximately 18 years and sugar approximately 400 years have been in the human diet for some time, industrially processed seed oils have been eaten by humans for little more than a century. It is clear that the replacement of animal-based foods with industrially produced food has led to the dramatic worsening of human health described by, among others, Weston Price, Cleve, Campbell, Yudkin, and Yellowlees. The increased consumption of grains and especially industrially extracted seed oils has led to a reduction in the consumption of saturated fat compared to consumption patterns 2 to 3 million years ago. Yet, according to the popular current dietary dogma, it is an increased consumption of saturated fat that is the main dietary cause of worsening human health. That's amazing.
I know.
Conversely, the key evidence shows that as humans have reduced their consumption of saturated fat, rates of ill health have increased. This might suggest that saturated fat makes a positive rather than a negative contribution to human health. The evolutionary perspective we present in this chapter supports this interpretation. Appearing before the 1980 U.S. House of Representatives Agricultural Committee to comment on the formation of the still current dietary guidelines, Dr. Philip Handler, then president of the National Academy of Science, asked, "What right has the federal government to propose that the American people conduct a vast nutritional experiment with themselves as subjects on the strength of so very little evidence that it will do them any good?" Good question. In retrospect, the experiment has been a catastrophic failure. Could it be that the modern era of mass manufacturing of ultra-processed foods, we find ourselves in a similar situation to that which humans faced at the beginning of the agricultural era? Do we lack the necessary knowledge of how to be healthy in this radically changed dietary environment? Could it be that, like McCarrison's rats, humans have developed scores of novel diet-induced illnesses specifically because our nutrition is now dependent on mass-produced, ultra-processed foods that are so far removed from the species-specific diet that kept humans healthy for millions of years? The respected biologist Theodosius Dobzhansky wrote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." He suggests that the ultimate test of any explanation in biology is that it must make evolutionary sense. Let us hope that the light of human evolution that we have presented here will guide further research into the relationship between food and health, and in particular, the formation of future dietary guidelines that will restore human health. Hopefully, we will have dietary guidelines that will restore human health at some point.
Let's hope.
it seems like the lobbyists for the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry are very, very, very strong still. And
I think, aren't they reviewing the guidelines this year?
are they?
New guidelines? I think so.
So we need carnivore.
Because they do it like every 4 years, I think. So they did them last in 2020.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe that's right. So I haven't really heard anything about like where that process is right now, like where they are in the review process, and even anything about the committee. I know there used to be, like, especially like when I was first doing my low carb journey, there were lots of articles and stuff about, because let's see, I think, well, whatever, 8 years ago. Yeah, that'd be about right. They were just, there was a lot of hope because there was a lot of information coming out and people speaking out, and it was very disappointing. Like for 1 year, the only thing that they actually did was say that cholesterol itself was not a dietary concern, which cholesterol
that was
isn't.
progress.
Yeah. So that was progress. But then I think the time after that, it was just like nothing. That's what Nina Teicholz talks about in her interviews. Like I know when she was talking with Dr. Berry in particular, I remember her, it was just frustrating because they just like, no studies, don't see them. They're not there, but there were.
Right.
Yeah.
All righty. All right. So let's see. So we've got the next section. We have a very tiny little section. So you want to read that, Carrie, and then maybe like part of the following section?
Sure. Okay.
Maybe we could split up the larger section.
All right. 1.2, insulin resistance, a unifying feature of chronic disease. Catherine Crofts. Before the discovery of insulin, diagnosis of diabetes was akin to a death sentence. The question became, for how long could death be delayed? With the discovery of insulin in 1920, the use of the life-saving medicine has become widespread. However, for a variety of reasons, insulin could not be quantified until the 1960s. This meant that what we understand about insulin was based on its actions, especially glucose, as this could be quantified. Many of the assumptions we make today about insulin are due to the delays in understanding insulin and its overarching role in controlling metabolism and health.
It's a little weird to me. I guess it's because I was born in the 60s. I just assumed that insulin was always had been around for a lot longer than that. 1920 is, not very long. It's been 100 years, right?
Yeah, and of course, I guess maybe in this part too, in this part also, she's saying before the discovery of insulin, diagnosis of diabetes was akin to a death sentence, but I presume they're talking about type 1 here. Because type 2 wouldn't have necessarily been a death sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, because they said that they used to control type 2 with diet.
Yeah.
So that wasn't clarified here.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's true. I mean, I'm assuming too that the prevalence of type 2 diabetes was pretty minimal back then. It's kind of more of a modern thing.
Yeah. Okay, so we have 1.2.1, history. During the 1920s through 30s, there was a general belief that all causes of diabetes mellitus could be explained by a deficiency of insulin. This theory was challenged separately by Harris and Hemsworth. Harris theorized via case studies that pancreatic dysfunctions would likely result in insulin's under, hypo, or over, hyper secretion, insulinism. Hemsworth, through a series of experiments in the 1930s, recognized that there were groups of patients who were insulin sensitive and those who were insulin resistant. He proposed that a state of diabetes might result from the inefficient action of insulin as well as a lack of insulin. Unfortunately, both Harris's and Hemsworth's work suffered by lack of bioassay to accurately quantify blood insulin concentration, and was also interrupted by World War II. It would not be until the 1970s and the work of Reven before the belief that all diabetes mellitus was caused by a deficiency of insulin would be successfully challenged.
Wow, that's a long gap. 40
That
years.
is yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Although insulin bioassays were pioneered in the 1950s, it took development of the insulin radioimmunoassay in the 1960s by Yellow
Basically the
and
lab test.
yeah.
Yeah.
By Yellow and Beerson to confirm that plasma insulin concentration in people with insulin resistant diabetes were much more higher compared to people with normal glycemia. So I guess meaning just regular normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kraft recognized that the etiology of type 2 diabetes likely stemmed from hyperinsulinemia that occurred while the patient was still normal glycemic. And that ties into what Ben Bickman talks about, and others, but I mean, he's really well known for that.
Right.
And this was in the 1950s and 60s.
Right.
That's depressing.
Yeah, they knew back then that elevated insulin was a precursor to diabetes.
And yet they don't test for it.
No, they don't test for it.
So you can have perfectly normal glucose levels, in the 80s, whatever, but your insulin is like pumping out big time. And the doctor says you're fine.
Yeah. Sandra says, do you guys know how shocked we are over here when we see plates of food in the U.S., strange colors and textured stuff that doesn't look like real food? No, I did not know that.
Where are you, Sandra? Or Sandra?
I know she's talking about New Zealand and Australia, so I'm assuming she's over there.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder,
I will say that I was in a meeting today where people were sharing pictures of their trips, and we had a manager who had gone to both China and Japan, and their food was very colorful and strange looking.
Well, and
it was colorful, and
I'm wondering if it's like advertisements or if is it like people posting their pictures?
Now, I'm wondering what she's seeing, like specifically.
Yeah,
because if it's these people on Facebook that are posting their pitiful Thanksgiving turkey plates, those things scare me.
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And that was when I was on a standard American diet. I would be like, what in the world is that?
Yeah, if it's advertisement, they definitely make fake food.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
to create the photos. But if it's people that are, like just posting on Instagram or something, the food they've eaten, then that's interesting, because that makes me wonder, like, what does a plate of food look like in Australia and New Zealand? Maybe it's not as colorful.
It sure is colorful in Japan. I mean, he showed us pictures of their meals, and I had never seen anything like it. It was beautiful, but it was very colorful. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're talking like pinks, like pastel colors, and just all these different. Yeah, it was just wild seeing all the colors.
Oh, interesting.
On that food.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, accidental captures of people on TV eating. Interesting. I wonder if it's like really even real food on TV, or if it's their fake food that they put on there. Or interesting. So, okay.
Okay, so a subsequent collaboration with Crofts and colleagues showed that, according to the World Health Organization criteria, at least 85% of people with an impaired glycemic response, impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose tolerance, or diabetes mellitus. Let's see, make sure I'm on the right line. N equals 3,750. 46% of sample also had elevated insulin concentration. With 2-hour postprandial concentration proving more diagnostic of hyperinsulinemia than fasting concentration. Although Kraft did not collect longitudinal data, Hiyashi and colleagues conducted a longitudinal study in 400 Japanese American men living in Seattle. They collected insulin and glucose samples every 30 minutes during a 2-hour 75-gram oral glucose tolerance test, and also analyzed the results based on insulin response pattern. They found that people with a time to maximum insulin concentration of 60 minutes or greater had at least 15% chance of developing type 2 diabetes over the following 10 years. So they were, so they could tell. And this falls in with what the other doctors are saying too, that like you can predict it 10 years in the future. You know what I'm saying? Like you could predict now that based on this, that someone will have type 2 diabetes in 10 years.
So I heard today 20 up to 2 decades.
Wow.
And this was a doctor that was on Dave Mack's channel. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's a carnivore. And you guys, if you haven't watched it, you have to. It's just like he doesn't care. He's calling them out, honey. He's calling out the.
I started watching that.
I think I started watching that too. Yeah, and that was good.
And he's talking about like class action lawsuit stuff. And sign me up.
Well, that would be great. Yeah, because if they knew this way back then they've been hiding it from us.
And then it says, while those who took 120 minutes or twice as long to reach maximal insulin concentration had a 35 to 50% chance of developing type 2 diabetes over the same time period.
So that would indicate insulin resistance, right? Because, because the insulin's still hanging out in the bloodstream hours later.
Yeah, that's how I'm interpreting that.
Okay. Yep, that's what it sounds like.
Due to the difficulties with assaying insulin, researchers tended to infer insulin resistance using insulin-medicated glucose disposal techniques.
Mediated. You said insulin medicated. It's insulin mediated.
Mediated, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let me read that sentence again. Due to the difficulties with assaying insulin, researchers tended to infer insulin resistance using insulin-mediated glucose disposal techniques in either the basal or postprandial state. It became apparent that people with type 2 diabetes, known then as maturity or late onset diabetes, had higher insulin concentrations and diminished insulin response. It was concluded that hyperglycemia developed when the pancreas was no longer capable of maintaining the compensatory hyperglycemia needed to overcome the defect in insulin's action. Any thoughts about that? Okay. Unfortunately for medical science, the fundamental challenge with these theories stemmed from the belief that it was the hyperglycemia causing the complications arising from the diabetes mellitus. However, this is not the case for many people with type 2 diabetes. The Action to Control Cardiovascular Risk in Diabetes Study Group, the ACCORD study, concluded that intensive glucose lowering increased mortality risks, did not lower cardiovascular risks, and caused significant weight gain.
So interesting.
That's interesting.
Okay, so let's see.
But it really makes sense with the obesity code book that we read. Because what were they doing to intensively lower the glucose? They were giving him insulin.
Giving him insulin. Yeah.
Right. and Jason Fung showed us that the insulin leads to weight gain.
The most interesting part to me is that it did not lower increased mortality risks. Like I'm always hearing one of the reasons we treat people's blood sugar with insulin at the hospital is that that they've done studies showing that the more well controlled the glucose, the better the healing, and just the overall, it's the morbidity and mortality rate is better, basically all around.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's kind of I'm just, of course, everything I've learned over there is not the same as over here. So,
well, I mean, and if that's the case, that it doesn't really decrease mortality, I mean, maybe they still want to treat it because it increases quality of life in the meantime. But that's interesting. That is so interesting, because like, that's not at all what we were taught.
yeah.
But I think maybe that you increase your lifespan if you're lowering it in a natural way versus forcing it with extra, exogenous insulin.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, for sure, because insulin is a fat storage hormone. So it makes sense to me that would increase the fat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that it said that it didn't lower mortality at all.
Right.
I mean, that's just totally opposed to what we've been taught.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Dr. Nelson.
Hi, Dr. Nelson.
Hi, Dr. Nelson.
So he says Low Carb USA has published a booklet in English and Spanish, The Ketogenic Diet Addressing Concerns Considering Benefits. He says it's
awesome.
Free.
Wow,
that is good to know.
Okay, we'll have to check that out. And it's
where can we get that on their website?
Low Carb USA, I guess it's probably, if you can look up their website, you could probably get it there. So interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Or maybe it's a download.
Yeah, it's probably a PDF, I would guess.
He said a booklet, but anyway.
So this suggests that insulin itself may be one of the drivers of cardiovascular disease. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I believe that. Mm-hmm. Raven continued to champion this belief, especially after linking glucose intolerance, hyperinsulinemia, and carbohydrate-induced hypertriglyceridemia with cardiovascular disease. With the later addition of essential hypertension, Raven coined the term Syndrome X, which we all know what Syndrome X turned into, for people who had insulin resistance, compensatory hyperinsulinemia, varying degrees of glucose tolerance, hypertriglyceridemia, and suppressed HDL cholesterol concentrations. As hyperinsulinemia/IR became associated with more metabolic abnormalities and clinical manifestations, such as endothelial dysfunction or central obesity, the term Syndrome X was retired in favor of the term metabolic syndrome, or MET-S. Yet, as became later known, many of the sequelae of IR would also directly or indirectly result in increased IR, which confounds understanding the underlying pathologies. So what did that mean that I just read? As it became later known, many of the
it's kind of a cycle. It's kind of like a cycle of like when you become more insulin resistant, and then the effect of becoming more insulin resistant is to become even more insulin resistant.
I gotcha. Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
That's how I was reading it. I don't know. What do you think, Kim?
So sequela, I did the definition just so I would not mess anything up. A condition a condition which is the consequence of a previous disease or injury. a long-term sequela of infection. So, yeah, it's something resulting from having a long-term disease, basically.
Okay.
So it would just increase since it's there. It would just keep getting bigger and bigger.
Getting worse and worse. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we have an interesting comment from Sandra here. In Australia, opposite rule. You guys would be surprised how much beer is drunk in Australia and thought okay. Indeed, people's coping mechanism with working in high heat. Yeah, and beer is dehydrating, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's cold.
Cold. So therefore, oh yeah.
And it's liquid.
Yeah, well, water with electrolytes is cold too.
True.
Yeah,
I'm not going to
interesting.
say that I'd never drink a beer if it's hot and I'm somewhere. I'm not going to say I never do, but I don't tend to drink beer anyway. That's not my like go-to beverage. But once in a while, if I'm out somewhere and there is an ice cold, like, oh, what is that one that it's a Mexican beer?
Corona.
Yes. Corona, and then there's another one, and there if it's cold
Modelo
and I have a
or whatever.
lime, then I will drink it.
Yeah, there's places in the US too where they drink more beer than others, but it's I know in Indian reservations too, there's a lot of beer drinking on Indian
They drink a lot of whiskey too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Harder liquors.
Oh, okay. Dr. Nelson said he's a member of this Low Carb USA. So he got it in an email. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Cool. So.
All right.
Okay.
With different clinical diagnostic definitions, table 1.3, the link to insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia has been somewhat lost. As will be discussed in this section, most of the diagnostic criteria can manifest as a result of insulin resistance and or hyperinsulinemia, thus limiting the clinical utility for understanding the syndrome.
Okay. And I do actually have some slides.
Okay.
I didn't pull this one out enough to make it wide enough. My wording is bad here. I didn't even notice that. But this is the mentioned figure 1-2 in this. And this is just like, I can't even follow all these arrows, but this has to
right. It's like
everything's interconnected. And I think this was kind of the point, is that it's all like one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And they all interact with each other with metabolic.
And in the middle, it's all metabolic syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, everybody always thinks that obesity is the cause.
Yep.
And this clearly shows that's not the first problem.
Right. Because they've been having high insulin levels, probably for chronically high insulin levels, which leads to obesity, but leads to all these other things: hypertension, dyslipidemia, increased cortisol, systemic inflammation, hyperglycemia, insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia. So it's like all of these, and there's like, it's not just everything is pointing to metabolic syndrome. They're also pointing to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like hyperglycemia points over to increased cholesterol, which then points over to insulin resistance. So it's like, they're all, and then that leads back to more hyperglycemia,
I feel like if you have to give one problem child of this whole thing, I think the biggest problem child is the hyperglycemia. I think that's the first, that's usually the first step in it, because when you eat sugar, then you're increasing your insulin and you're increasing your cortisol, and all the other things happen around that, I feel like.
Yeah.
But what is the first thing people are told though? Lose weight.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're not considering any of this other stuff.
Wow, that's really eye-opening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And
So-
Dr. Nelson has another note. He said, go to their website and look for it. He said it doesn't let, of course, it wouldn't because of the access, but it wouldn't let him put the link here. It is a download.
Oh,
He
86
about
pages.
86 pages, so it might be good for this book club.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah,
This is
That's
pages.
that's a little more than a booklet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we'll have to review that as one of our book club books.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just to
Right.
get the word out there, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thank you. And then in this section you just read also mentioned this table, which you cannot see here. I'm like, some of these slides were very difficult, but I'll just, it's just basically it's the definitions of metabolic syndrome. So if you buy this book, or if you can somehow zoom in really well, you'll be able to see what this does. This chart is, it actually provides you with the actual like metrics for how to determine metabolic syndrome. So it lists along the left-hand side, it lists central obesity, dyslipidemia, glycemic profile, hypertension, and then it also has microalbuminuria, which it didn't mention previously, I don't think. But it tells you the diagnostic criteria. So, like, for example, for central obesity, it says it is a waist circumference of 102 centimeters for a male or greater than 88 centimeters for a female. That's based on the first column, which is the National Cholesterol Education Program, Adult Treatment Panel 3. And then it tells you the middle column is the WHO, and the last column is the International Diabetes Federation. So the WHO defines central obesity as body mass index of 30 kilograms per meter squared, or a waist tip ratio of 0.9 for a male, or greater than 0.85 for a female. And then the International Diabetes Association, it tells you what their metrics are. So it does this for all of these, like what your cholesterol should be, what your glycemic profile should be, and it gives you all the metrics, and even your blood pressure. They don't even agree. Well, two of them agree on blood pressure. So the
And two of them don't even list the microalbuminuria as a problem.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Only the WHO lists albumin secretion greater than 20 micrograms per minute as one criteria. But yeah, they don't necessarily agree completely with each other in how to define these. But but that's that chart. So figured I'd at least show it to show that that's what we get to look at in the book.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we can let me see where we're at here. We can do the next section. Kim, you want to read like the next 3 little sections?
Sure. 1.2.2 insulin. Insulin produced by the beta cells of the pancreas is the body's only hormone to lower blood glucose concentration. With autocrine, paracrine, and endocrine characteristics, in combination with adequate substrate supply and under the influence of other hormones, insulin orchestrates an integrated anabolic response to nutrient availability. Yet insulin is also a pleiotropic hormone, as it can simultaneously influence multiple phenotypic traits across most body systems. 1.2.2.1 insulin synthesis.
Before we go to that, define what exactly, I need a refresher. What exactly is a phenotypic trait?
Phenotype and genotype. I remember that.
I remember the word.
Let's
see, observable. Okay, so the phenotype refers to the observable physical properties of the organism that includes the organism's appearance, development, and behavior. Okay, so I just want to make sure we're clear what this is saying. An example would be your height, your eye color, your blood type.
So am I wrong about this? You may remember this and you may not, but I'm thinking genotype is like what possibilities are contained within your genes, and then like phenotype is what's expressed. Is
what's
that
expressed? I think I seem to recall that.
Dr. Nelson? Help.
Yeah. If you're still here,
Dr. Nelson, if you're still here.
So basically what it's saying is it can influence the multiple phenotype traits across most body systems. I hope that they elaborate on that.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt, but a person's genotype is their unique sequence of DNA. More specifically, this term is used to refer to the two forms a person has inherited from their mother and father for a particular gene. Phenotype is the observable expression of this genotype. So I was right.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right. You go.
Don't want to miss without a comment.
I'm glad we have these nurses on here because
it's a lot of pressure though, because I mean, are we going to use that on a daily basis? No.
Oh yeah. It's use it or lose it. Vancomycin can ruin metabolic health, MRSA prevalence. Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, it messes with your gut microbiome for sure.
I mean, all antibiotics can do that.
Yeah. Antibiotics.
They say that the one that they always give, what is it? They always give the little kids the pink stuff. What is it?
Oh yeah, I don't remember.
Amoxicillin.
Yes.
Yeah. So they say that one is just so benign, but I don't believe it.
I don't believe it either. Why would you give it then?
Exactly.
I mean,
obviously it does something.
Yeah. Either that or it's a placebo. Maybe. Like, okay, well, here, parent, I'll give you this, even though it doesn't do anything. Wow.
Okay, so 1.2.2.1, insulin synthesis and release. Insulin is a dipeptide formed from alpha and beta peptide chains connected by disulfide bonds. Initially synthesized as the polypeptide proinsulin, a signal peptide, is rapidly cleaved to form proinsulin, which is the alpha and beta chains connected by C peptide. Proinsulin is stored in readily releasable or reserve pool vesicles in a calcium and zinc rich environment. It is estimated that a very small fraction of insulin is in the readily releasable vesicles, with the remainder, approximately 95 to 99%, in the reserve pool. After maturation, vesicle exocytosis releases an equimolar ratio of C-peptide and insulin into the portal vein in response to a variety of stimuli, predominantly elevated glucose concentration, fuel secretagogues such as arginine, hormones including osteocalcin, glucagon-like peptide 1 or GLP-1, and gastric inhibitory peptide, GIP, or via S vagal nerve stimulation, as shown in table 1.4. Glucose stimulated insulin secretion can be further augmented by various stimuli, including incretins, B cell to B cell interaction, and acute elevations of non-esterified fatty acids, or B-hydroxybutyrate.
Okay, so I have this
beta hydroxybutyrate.
I have the table 1.4 that is mentioned here.
This was a mouthful.
That was a mouthful.
Like, I have to think about this paragraph.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the table really summarizes a lot, though, is that and Dr. Nelson says you're correct. What was the question again?
I think about the phenotype and genotype.
Oh, the phenotype and genotype. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson.
Dr. Nelson.
He'd email the booklet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you can email it to any of us. I mean, I'm midlifecarnivore@gmail.com. If you want to email it to me, I'll get it to Kim and Carrie. That'd be awesome.
Yes, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Doctor.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just
And my email is on my YouTube page if anybody ever wants it.
Awesome. Perfect.
And you know what we could do, ladies? We could maybe have our doctor friend on to help explain some of this stuff.
Yeah, Dr. Nelson, anytime you
We
want
can
to
take turns reading. Dr.
If
Nelson, you want to come on?
if he's willing to come on with us sometimes and just, you know, it might help to have a doctor to interpret some of this too.
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, we do not dislike doctors.
No.
We just hold them to a higher standard and expectations for them are super high.
That is true. We expect very good clinical judgment from all that.
I expect my doctor to use their own brain aside from the base of knowledge they were given in medical school.
Yeah.
Right. And for them to just have an open mind.
I don't think that's too much to ask. I think, like you said, an open mind and be able to, you know, work with me. So we love doctors, especially good ones. So we welcome you.
Oh yeah. And Kim and I, nurses, have worked with so many doctors, and we know the good ones from the not so good ones.
Yeah. Basically, I have found in my 24 years of nursing that if a doctor is open to listen and really hear you and you know, just basically doesn't act like a jerk. I mean, it's not hard. You know, it's the bar's pretty low, actually. It's not, but I mean, they can have all the knowledge in the world, but if they're not open to listening, you know, what good is it?
I've heard people say that like their doctor wouldn't even order tests for them. Like if they told the doctor and said, look, I would like for example, my fasting insulin, and I understand that my insurance is probably not going to pay for it, but I will pay for it. Will you please order it? And I've heard people say that their doctors wouldn't do it. And I'm like, but mine did. I mean, he ordered whatever I asked for. I mean, I just told him, I was like, I'll pay for it. I just need you to order it. He was like,
they probably don't want to deal with the hassle of possibly being questioned by deviating from what they're told to order.
Yeah. And then they have, you know, the standard of care that they have to, that they're expected to follow. And then the insurance company won't pay for stuff. And so I get it. I understand why they make a lot of those decisions. But basically, if you're willing to pay for it, I don't see why they shouldn't.
Well,
my doctor wouldn't even, and this is more than one doctor, blatantly refused to test my hormones. And, you know, they're like, well, we just go on symptoms. Okay, first of all, I don't think that you're, I mean, I don't want to say competent enough to give me hormone replacement, but I mean, she doesn't seem like she is. She would have sent me somewhere else anyway. But, you know, I just don't understand why everybody was so resistant to testing my hormones. And then, you know, I know why they say it is. It's because they say that, oh, it depends on where you're at in your cycle. It could be all over the board, right? Okay, I get that. But if it's really, really low, then that's going to be like different, you know, like it's going to be like, obviously you are in menopause, which I was. And my functional medicine doctor tested and told me that. And now I've started hormones and I've been on them for about a month. And it's very life-changing for me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's good if you can go to an independent doctor.
Yeah.
Instead of somebody who's part of a big medical group. You're more likely, I think, to find someone who isn't afraid to deviate a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
But,
so we say all that to say that Dr. Nelson, you're always welcome on our show.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. So, yeah. So this table, basically, it's like, it just shows there is more than just glucose that stimulates the release of insulin.
Yeah.
From the beta cells. There's a whole bunch of things that will cause your body to, to produce and release insulin. So that's kind of my take. I don't want to try to read all these and, but that's kind of my
vagal nerve stimulation. You know, that's, Do we know? Okay. I don't know if maybe I'm taking for granted that people know what the vagus nerve is. So just to give you an idea, the vagus nerve runs down the center of your body, basically. And whenever you bear down, you're stimulating the vagus nerve. Okay.
That's why some people pass out on the toilet.
So like that's why Elvis died of a heart attack on the toilet, because his heart was weak and he bared down, and that was all she wrote. But if you've ever known anybody who was like at the sight of blood, they would just pass out. Usually it's because they're just like, they're tensing up and they're stimulating that vagus nerve, and, it can drop your heart rate and your blood pressure like that. So that's, and there's a lot of other things there's a lot more to it than that, but that's just to give you an idea of what
pain can do it too. It's funny, the last place that I worked when I was working in GI and hepatology, our department was right next to the department that did hand therapy. And I can't tell you how many times we had to run over there because they would call, and it's not like the hospital where you call a code for, like, in the clinics, you call a code for pretty much anything, whenever the patient's like dizzy or passing out. We get so many codes over there from people passing out because of the pain from the hand therapy. And it's a vagal response,
Wow.
They go down and, next thing you know, they're fine. Right. But yeah. So so that produces insulin. So it's not just eating sugar. All right. So where are we at? We're going an hour and a half. I have got to go. You want to stop it right here?
Yeah, this might be a good place to stop.
Yep. All right. Very good. So
it always goes by so fast. I enjoy this so much.
I
Me
know.
too.
But I've got an interview at 4:30 for Healing Humanity. So I got to eat in between now and then.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thank you everybody for coming. And we will see you either Sunday for our book club or next week.
That's right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming. Thanks so much, Dr. Nelson, for the input. Thank you so much, Cynthia, everybody, and Arlene's here, Sandra. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we will see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Next Thursday.
Have a great rest of your week.
All righty. End of the